Reg Keys, whose son Tom was killed in Iraq in 2003. He stood against Tony Blair in the 2005 election as an anti-war independent candidate. Very good afternoon to you, Mr. Keys. What goes through your mind when you hear Tony Blair say that?
Well, to be honest, Maxine, I'm absolutely flabbergasted at this. He seems to be moving the goalposts. He knows he's about to be exposed for his deceit and his misleading of Parliament in the early part of next year when he meets Sir John Shillcott at the inquiry. And I just think he's trying to soften his approach to make himself look less guilty, so to speak. This man actually said in February 2003, Tony Blair addressed the House and said that Saddam can stay in power if he hands over his weapons of mass destruction. And now he's saying now that I would have chosen a different argument had he not had WMD. Well, as we all know, going to war for regime change is against international law. I just think he's struggling now to try and find some moral high ground to remain on in order to try and justify the total farce of the Iraq invasion. And I will go ahead and say, Maxine, that I thought at the time, because I was foolish enough to believe Tony Blair, that it was the right thing to do. My son Tom, when he went off to war, I said to him, "Be careful out there, Tom, it's going to be very dangerous." And he said, "We have to go, Dad. There's a madman out there with weapons of mass destruction about to unleash in 45 minutes. And that was a total lie. What Tony Blair has done, he's not only betrayed the troops, he's betrayed the nation here. We put a man in power as a Prime Minister, expecting to be honest and truthful when he addresses Parliament, and this man totally misled Parliament. He misled the armed forces, and sadly those 180 troops that have given their lives for deceit, and that man has got a lot of answering to do when it comes before Sir John Shillcott.
So your son and his colleagues who died there, and all the many other soldiers who were injured as well, it was in vain?
It was in vain. This war didn't have to take place. There are other vile dictators around the world. We're not going to war with every dictator on the planet. Look what happened with in Libya with Gaddafi. We're now shaking hands and doing business deals with Gaddafi. Who's to say that couldn't have taken place in years to come against Saddam? I thought it was the right thing to do because of WMD. Tony Blair said the information was detailed, extensive and authoritative. And that was a total fabrication of the truth. And young men, young women went out to Iraq and died for that cause, and that cause didn't actually exist. If you betray your country, Maxine, you are a traitor. What happens if your country betrays you? I feel Tony Blair has betrayed the oath of allegiance these troops signed. We all know the risk of death and serious injury goes along with being a soldier, but the soldiers don't expect to be lied to by their own Prime Minister. I just hope Sir John Shillcott, when he meets Tony Blair early in January, and I shall be on the doorstep as well waiting to see that interview, I hope he's very incisive, and I hope that the questioning that he gives to the former Prime Minister is not benign questions.
And given what you're saying, what does that make Tony Blair then?
A war criminal, to put it in a nutshell. Maxine, look what happened on that night of shock and awe. British and American warplanes flew over Baghdad, and we gave it a nice macho title, Shock and Awe. In those bombings, which came without warning, there must have been hundreds of innocent civilians, Iraqi men, women and children dying in that first onslaught. What would happen if Iraqi warplanes flew over London and did the same? We'd say it was an act of international terrorism. What is beginning to look like now, that this was an act of international terrorism by Bush and Blair. This didn't have to happen. Both nations were misled, and I was amazed when Sir John Scarlett gave his evidence to the Iraq inquiry. He said that his 45-minute threat referred to battlefield munitions, not WMD. For goodness sake, there's two men here at the top of their profession, Sir John Scarlett, Tony Blair, in charge of the country, and they can't get the dialogue right, what it actually means. I can only go back to what Sir Freddie Viggers said when he gave his evidence. The whole issue is being run by a bunch of amateurs at the very highest level, and it would be laughable if people hadn't died for this. We have to not only remember Iraq will be watching this inquiry. Tens of thousands of innocent Iraqis have paid for this with their life, and Tony Blair just comes out and says, "Oh well, if that argument hadn't have worked with WMD, I'd have just picked another one." If this was trying to push a minor bill through the House, it would be a joke. We'd all be laughing. But lives have been lost. Lives are still being lost in a destabilised Iraq now.
Okay.
I just feel exasperated.
Mr. Keys, thank you very much indeed for joining us this afternoon. Reg Keys there.